Hello everyone, welcome back to ESL DRILL. This is part 2 of the lesson The Brave Potter. At the end of the part 1, we learnt that the potter fainted upon seeing the tiger. Actually, he thought that he had brought his donkey from the forest, but it was a tiger. He lost his consciousness and he fell down there. Now let's see what happened after that. Let me read this first. A few years later, war broke out between the potter's country and a much stronger neighbor. The king immediately gathered a large army, but he realized that it was not strong enough to save his country from defeat. He needed a hero to lead his army. Where could he find such a brave man? The king hurriedly called his ministers together and asked their advice. One of the ministers remembered the story of the brave potter. "Your Majesty," the minister said, "I know someone who can lead our army." The king immediately sent a messenger to the potter's house. When the potter realized that he had been made general of the army, he became frightened. The king had ordered him to go to the palace the next day. A few years later, it means after the potter had brought the tiger home, war broke out between the potter's country and a stronger neighbor country. So broke out, this actually comes from break out. So break out is a phrasal verb which means start to happen. You can talk about war, battle, something like this. It means here a war suddenly happened between his country and a neighboring country. So the king wanted to gather large army. Gather means here collect, and he collected army. But he understood that the army he gathered was not enough, was not strong enough to save his country. So he was looking for someone who was stronger or who was more courageous. So he immediately called his ministers and had a meeting with them. One of the ministers told the king about the potter. Now look at this here, one of the ministers. When we have one of the, you should always have a plural noun after it. One of the ministers. Okay. Immediately the king sent a messenger, someone who carries messages. Messenger is a person who carries a message. Now he sent a messenger to the potter's house and the messenger informed the potter that he was the general of the army from then. Who was general of the army, by the way? General is an officer of a very high rank in the army, and here he was made the general of the army. He was to lead the army of the country. Next, how could he, a poor ignorant potter, become the general of the army? He had never carried a sword, nor had he ever ridden a horse. "Oh, I shall die because of that stupid donkey," groaned the potter to his wife. "He has only brought us trouble." The next day he went with his wife to the capital. The king was pleased to see him and ordered him to lead the army into battle the next day. The enemy were not far from the gates of the city. A splendid house had been prepared for the potter and his wife. The horse which would carry him into the battle was ready in the stable. That night the potter could not sleep. He was nervous and worried because he did not know how to ride a horse. Let's look at a few words here. Now, ignorant potter. Ignorant, not having the knowledge of something. So what did the potter not know? He did not know how to lead the army because he was just a potter. Moreover, he had never carried a sword. You know what a sword is. And he had never ridden a horse. Now we used a negative sounding word at the beginning of this class, so we changed the position of subject and verb. Usually we say he had never carried. Look at this here, never carried, had never carried. But here subject goes after had. Now he also thought that he would die because of his donkey. Here the word groan means make a long deep sound because you are upset. Groaned is in past tense. It means the potter made a long deep sound because he was really upset as the donkey had escaped. And he felt that his donkey brought him the trouble that he was facing. Anyway, the horse that would take the potter into the horse was ready in the stable. Sorry. So the next day, the potter went to the capital city with his wife, and the king was very happy, and he ordered him to lead the army into the battlefield. Battle is fight. The enemy were not far from the gates of the city. A splendid house had been prepared for the potter and his wife. Splendid means a very good, wonderful. Now a wonderful house had been prepared, and the horse was ready in the stable. Stable is a building or a place where horses are kept. But the potter could not sleep because he was nervous and worried, as he did not know how to ride a horse. Let's see what happened next. If I fall off, everybody will laugh at me, he thought. I will get up very early tomorrow and practice riding the horse. At dawn, the potter woke up his wife, and they went to the stable. They saw the beautiful black horse ready for its new master. Oh, how tall he is, sighed the potter. I shall never be able to climb onto his back. Put this bench beside him, said his wife, and use it as a step. Even with the help of the bench, the potter had much difficulty climbing onto the horse's back. When he was finally seated, he found that the saddle was very slippery. Please tie my feet to the stirrups, dear wife, said the potter, otherwise I shall certainly fall off. His wife found some rope and bound her husband's feet tightly to the stirrups. She then passed the rope underneath the horse and tied the two stirrups together. So it's all about the potter worrying about as to how to lead the army into the battlefield. So he was really worried. At dawn he woke up his wife, and both of them went to the stable. So at dawn is the time of the day when light first appears, in the morning. And the opposite of dawn is dusk. Dusk is the time of the day when day changes into night, actually. Now we can't say that is the time of the day. At the end of the day, when day changes to night, that's dusk. So they saw the horse which was ready, and as soon as the potter saw the horse, he wondered how tall the horse was. He sighed, actually. We discussed this word sigh in the first part. When you sigh, you let deep breath of air out, like you breathe out and breathe in, or maybe breathe in and breathe out. Now his wife asked him to put the bench beside the horse so that he could easily climb onto the horse. But even with the help, the potter could not do that, could not climb onto the horses. But finally he managed to be seated on the horse's back. But the saddle was very slippery. Now what is saddle? Saddle is a leather seat that you sit on when you ride a horse. The horse rider sits on the saddle, the leather seat. Now that was very slippery. The reason was he did not know how to do that. Please tie my feet to the stirrups. What is a stirrup? Stirrup is one of the metal rings that hang down on each side of a horse's saddle, used to support the rider's foot. Now here T is missing, rider's foot. Now the horse rider puts his feet into the rings, into the metal rings. That's how he supports. He supports himself while riding a horse. Now his wife bound her husband's feet tightly to the stirrups so that he would not fall off. And let's see what happened. She also passed a length of rope around the potter's waist and tied him to the saddle. Now please tie my hands to his neck, said the potter. Meanwhile, the big black horse was impatiently pawing his hooves on the ground. When the potter's wife tried to pass another rope around its neck, the horse suddenly jumped free. It galloped out of the stable with the potter hanging like a sack of rice on its back. Only the ropes kept it from crashing to the ground. The potter held tightly to the horse's neck and prayed to all the gods to save his life. After galloping through the quiet streets, the horse crashed through the city gates and raced across the open fields. He leapt over fences and streams and began to head for the enemy's camp. When the potter realized where they were going, he tried harder than ever to stop the horse. He pulled wildly on the reins, but it was no use. The horse galloped on. The potter asked his wife to tie his hands to the horse's neck, but the big black horse was impatiently pawing his hooves on the ground. Now let's see what hooves are. Hooves is the plural form of hoof. Hoof means the hard part of the foot of some animals, like cows, these horses. Now this horse was pawing his hooves. Paw as a verb means to scratch or touch something repeatedly with a paw. Paw is a noun too. Paw means the foot of an animal with nails or claws. C-L-A-W-S, claws. Now, to scratch or touch something repeatedly with a paw. The horse was moving its leg, its paw actually. It means he was getting ready to go. And when the potter's wife tried to pass another rope, the horse suddenly started running. In fact, it was galloping actually. Gallop means when an animal like horse gallops, it moves very fast. Now, at one time, all four legs are up in the air. Now, when an animal runs very fast, it happens. He was galloping, the horse was galloping, but the potter was still there on the horse because of the ropes that his wife used. And after galloping through the quiet streets, silent streets, the horse crashed through the city gates. Went through the city gates and finally went to the open fields. He left. Here he is the horse. The horse leapt. Leapt is actually the second form of leap. Leap means jump. Leapt, jumped. The horse jumped over fences and streams and finally began to move towards the enemy camp. Now we already discussed this word. Head for means move towards. Began to move towards the enemy's camp. When the potter realized all this, he tried to stop, but he could not stop. He actually pulled on the reins. Reins are leather bands which are attached to horse's mouth. Actually, they are used by the horse rider to control the horse. Now he tried to control the horse using the reins, but it was of no use. Let's see what happened. When they passed a young tree, the potter grabbed a branch, but the horse did not stop there. Instead, the tree was pulled out of the ground. A sentry from the enemy camp saw the potter galloping towards the camp with a tree in one hand and his reins in the other. That must be the general who captured a tiger with his bare hands, he thought. Now he has approached a tree with only one hand. He is not an ordinary man. He is a giant. Run, run, save yourselves. The famous tiger general is coming at the head of a large army to attack us. He has the strength of a giant. He has approached a tree with one hand. The frightened soldiers fled. Their king was left by himself in his tent. Hurriedly, he wrote a letter begging for peace and apologizing for attacking the country. He left this letter in the tent. Then he jumped on his horse and followed his soldiers. When the potter's black horse reached the deserted camp, he stopped. Here is the horse. Now finally the potter kept trying to stop the horse. He grabbed a branch. Grab means hold, grabbed means held. He tried to take hold of a branch so that he would stop, but it was not possible. A sentry from the enemy camp saw the potter coming on the horse. Now, sentry is actually a soldier, a guard. A guard or soldier from the enemy camp saw all this, and he warned his other soldiers. That must be the general who captured a tiger with his bare hands. Without anything in the hands, empty hands. Now he has uprooted a tree. Uproot a tree means to take a tree out of the ground with roots. Actually, you know what happened. The potter was not really brave. The first part we discussed, What happened? He was not brave there. It was just luck that made him a famous person. Again here, luck favored him. So luck was on his side, and when he was actually trying to stop the horse by holding a branch of a tree, the tree came out with its roots, and then the soldiers from the enemy camp thought that he was so powerful that they could not beat him, that they could not defeat him. So again, luck favored the potter. And he also described the potter as famous tiger general. And he also asked all of them to flee, to run away. The frightened soldiers fled. Fled is the second form of, past form of flee. Flee means run away or escape. So all the soldiers escaped, but the king was left there alone. And immediately the king wrote a letter asking for peace and apologizing for attacking the country. Now, apologizing, he expressed his regret. He felt sorry for attacking the country. He wrote a letter and he left the letter in the tent, and then he followed his soldiers. It means he also fled from there, escaped from there. And when the potter's black horse reached the place, it stopped. He stopped. The horse stopped. Now, how was the camp? The camp was deserted. Deserted means here empty. Look at this here. The empty camp was there. What happened next? With shaking hands, the potter untied his feet and fell to the ground. When he looked around, he was surprised to find the camp empty. He looked in the king's tent and found the letter. The puzzled potter walked back to the city with the letter in his pocket. He went to his wife and gave her the letter. "Dear wife," he said, "never in my life will I ride a horse again. Please take this letter to our king and tell him that the enemy has run away. I am going to bed." His wife ran towards the palace with the letter. When the king read the letter, he was full of praise for his new general. He asked the potter's wife where her husband was. "My husband is tired, your majesty. The servants have put him to bed," answered the wife respectfully. You know what happened? With shaking hands, you know how afraid the potter was really, but the enemy did not think so. Now he untied his feet. Now untie means to remove the knots. When you tie, you make a knot. When you untie, you remove the knots. So he fell to the ground, and then he was really shocked to see the camp empty. He thought that he would be killed there, but it was totally different. Now finally he found the letter written by the enemy king, and he took it back to his house, and he gave it to his wife and asked his wife to go and give the letter to the king. He also told his wife that he would never ride a horse again in his life, and he slept after this. And the potter's wife went to the palace and gave the letter to the king. Okay, let's see what happened after that. "Let him rest today. Tell him to come tomorrow to receive his reward," the king said. Next morning, the potter went to the king's palace. He left the black horse in the stable and walked to the palace with his wife. The streets were filled with cheering crowds. They had all heard about his brave action. "Look how humble he is," they said to each other. "Any other man would ride to the palace on a horse, but he is walking like an ordinary man. He is truly a humble and brave man." The king rewarded the potter so well that he did not need to work again. The country was peaceful for the rest of his life, and the potter never rode a horse again. Now the king asked his wife, the potter's wife, to take rest that day, and asked her to tell the potter to come to the palace to collect his reward the next day. So he went there, but he told his wife that he would not ride the horse again. The same thing happened. He was actually walking to the palace. But the cheering crowds, look at this here, groups of people that were praising the potter, applauding the potter, clapping for him. All those people thought that he was a very humble man. Now they thought that even though he drove away the enemy soldiers, he was not walking, he was not actually riding a horse, he was walking in the streets. So that's why they thought that he was very humble but not proud. Again, this was to his advantage. Again, luck favored him. Look how humble he is, they all said. And the king rewarded the potter so well. How much? How much did he reward the potter with? With so much that the potter did not need to work again in his life, in his entire life. And the country was peaceful for the rest of his life. Rest of means a remaining period of his life. Because the enemy countries know that there is this brave potter who is ready to rescue his own country. That's the end of this part 2, and that's the end of this lesson, the brave potter. I hope you have enjoyed listening to me or watching this. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have really liked this, please like and share and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done that. I'll see you in my next video.